Welcome to the Starting Over Stronger show, where you'll find help and hope for your divorce survival and recovery. Divorce well, live well.
Hey guys, welcome back to the Starting Over Stronger Divorce Survival and Recovery show, where each week we dive into the topics that matter to you while you go through and recover from your divorce. Today is going to be the second in our awesome new segments on the show called Coach Chats. These episodes are where I sit down with another life coach and talk about how to improve your life, even during divorce. And I am excited today to welcome my CDC certified divorce coach mentor, Susan Kiernan, to the show. Hello and welcome, Susan. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi, I'm so honored to be here, Annie. I worked with Annie, and she is a very talented coach and a great person. So like I said, it's a great honor. As Annie said, I'm Susan Kiernan. I've been supporting people in their divorce for many years. I actually started out in the divorce arena supporting kids whose parents were going through divorce. I did that for 14 years. And then when I was blindsided by my own divorce, I actually made mistakes, and I eventually threw in the towel in my negotiations for some of the very reasons we're actually going to talk about today. And that impassioned me to segue into supporting women, and I do support some men, to have a better divorce experience and build resilience, take care of themselves, and make thoughtful, rational, knowledgeable decisions.
Awesome. That sounds great. Well, thank you again for joining me and the listeners here to explore this important phenomenon, which goes by many names. I think of it mostly as fear brain, but I know that other terms and euphemisms like monkey brain, primitive brain, reptilian brain, fight or flight, and even divorce brain. Whatever you call it, you know if you're feeling it. You hopefully know the damage that it can do. And it may very well be the one thing you wish you could change the most about your divorce experience or yourself during your divorce. Well, guess what? We're going to talk about just that today. So before we dive in, though, would you, Susan, just tell us a little bit about your own story of divorce, and, be as long or short as you wish. Just, it's good to give the listeners a glimpse of how that they could maybe relate to you on a personal level.
Absolutely, Annie. And it's funny, just when you said that part about, the one thing you wish you could change most about your divorce, I thought, oh my goodness, I might be your perfect guest because, my divorce was started in 2007 and ended in 2010. And, I wish I could go back and change things. I think, as I mentioned earlier, I was blindsided by my divorce. I thought I was happily married. It was almost, 20 years. And it wasn't perfect, but it was really pretty good. And we had a very busy life with 4 kids. Our daughter had some serious medical issues, and right in the middle of her recovering from major brain and spine surgery. And ironically, at the same time, 2 of my sons had badly broken legs from sports related injuries. I found out that my husband was cheating on me. And, just everything hit the fan. And within a very short period of time, I lost 40 pounds. I had a little to spare, but probably not 40. And like I said, it was about a 4-year divorce process, and it ended in a post-divorce modification mediation with me pretty spontaneously, and now regretfully, giving up permanent spousal support in a moment of just absolute dire need to get away from the bullying and what felt like it was going to be unending torture. And so he was threatening to pull my kids out of college, and I just saw no end to it or to the lengths that he would go. And I was probably massively ramped up in my fear brain, and I threw in the towel. And, we're going to talk a little bit about the fear brain, but, I am happily remarried. I manage my fear brain beautifully now because I saw, what it created in my life. But, if I had been in my critical thinking brain, I would have been able to make more rational choices and to see that there were other choices than to just go, okay, I'm done. I'm out. Like I have to get out of this, but I didn't have clear thinking that day. So that's basically my story.
Wow. Well, that is a lot. And I really appreciate you sharing that side of yourself with us. I know it means a lot to me and to our listeners. So, fear brain is a big topic, and on a neurological level, it's simply, it starts in the region of the brain called the amygdala, which is this little almond-shaped set of nuclei in the temporal lobe of the brain, whose job it is to detect danger. And I love the analogy that I've heard many, many times. Since most of us are no longer being chased by wild animals and having to hunt to survive, this little guy should have an easier job. But try telling him that, right? I think he has made it his own personal mission to turn a lot of other things into wild animals in our lives. And in all reality, I mean, there are emotional and intellectual dangers that certainly fall in that category, right?
Oh, yeah.
And you're a nurse also, right?
I am. Yeah. I've been a nurse for, oh my gosh, a very, very, very long time. I'm not actively practicing, but I have interspersed over, the last, oh my gosh, probably 35 years. And I'm also a yoga teacher, but.
Okay. Well, So you have a little bit of a biological aspect to this. So share your thoughts about brain science and fear and what happens when the amygdala is hijacked, or really anything you wish to about this.
Sure. Oh, thanks, Annie. So the amygdala, like you said, it's this prehistorically wired, part of our brain that was completely designed to keep us safe. And it hasn't appropriately really adjusted to modern day life. So what it does is it's scanning our environment every 1/5 of a second, if you can believe that. It's amazing, the human body, right? But it's always scanning for threats or, things we should fear. And what happens is the amygdala perceives the threat, and boom, the stress hormones like adrenaline and cortisol surge through our body. The prefrontal cortex, which is like our thinking center, gets disabled. So there goes critical thinking and reasoning, and voila, the fight or flight response has been activated. And some people say the amygdala has been hijacked, or some people commonly refer to it as, wow, I feel really triggered. This applies to perhaps seeing a snake, and automatically, without you even thinking, your brain says, snake, jump, but it also happens, in social situations or in personal interactions, and it's automatic and unconscious. And how we feel this, as you probably have, anyone's experienced this, is our heart rate and breathing speeds up. Our palms make it sweaty. We might even shake a little bit. Like, think about, you're laying in bed and it's dark and you hear a sound, like a really credible sound, right? You can relate to that right away, that like, boom, the fear brain is being triggered. And actually all of these things even affect how we store memory. And, so that has an impact on your experience as well. And so, if I may, a little bit about how this works in divorce, a very real example that I noticed that I can share with you from my own life. And actually some of the people that I work with have reported to me the same. So for me, in the early stages of my divorce, every time the text tone for my ex-husband would go off on my phone, it would evoke this powerful response. And I started to recognize it. My heart would race. I would shake. I would feel so like quivery. And I suffered with this for a while before I said to myself, hey girl, get hold of this. You cannot let this continue. This is like Pavlov's dog. Text tone, this is controlling me. So I decided to get into my phone, and iPhones were pretty new back in 2007. And I changed his text tone to the sound of crickets. I was thinking I was also very funny. So every time it went off, I would take a pause. I would take a deep, calming breath and say, I hear nothing but crickets. And I would make myself laugh. And I mean, I laughed every single time, probably hundreds of times, and unfortunately my kids heard me a few times, but I don't think they drew the conclusion, but it was just enough of a pause to divert my fear and have me more in control of my response.
Yeah, what a great idea. You took control of the situation, and it sometimes takes us a while to get there, but ultimately we have to. It's us and only us that's going to take care of ourselves during this process, especially. And so as we're thinking about getting hijacked in our thinking, let's think through some of the symptoms that the amygdala has, commandeered our brain. One that I can think of is just kind of that cloudy thinking, just not being able to think clearly.
Oh, yes.
What do you think? Have you any examples of that?
Oh, gosh, absolutely. One of the things I think, that, and I'm sure you've experienced this as well, that drives people actually to consult with me is they'll say, oh my gosh, What's wrong with me? I used to be so highly functioning and now I can't think. My lawyer talks to me. My ex-husband's negotiating with me or talking to me, and my brain just goes squirrely. I can't think. I'm not clear. It's foggy. And I'm like, what's happening to me? Is there something wrong with me? That's a very, very common and probably rises to the top of, oh gosh, what is this? I got to understand this and I got to learn how to deal with it. So a very strong symptom.
And that kind of leads to poor decision making because we're not able to think through things clearly or critically. It's very easy for us to do things like what you said, throw in the towel and just say, you know what, it isn't worth my peace of mind or this stress that I'm dealing with in order to get this thing that I have said I need and want, in my divorce. And so we kind of give up a little too easily sometimes on things that really are very important for our future.
Absolutely. It also, locks it down because when you're in a fight or flight, for example, prehistorically, if you were running from a saber-toothed tiger, you don't want to open up the path to reasoning like, oh, what kind of choices do I have here, right? So the same type of thing happens when you're hijacked. You don't see so clearly in hindsight that there were many other options. In my case in particular, there were many other things I could have done. I could have even probably said, I'll take out loans for the kids for college. That wasn't even available to me because that's what happens. You're rationalizing or thinking of other options or getting a bigger perspective. It's just shut down.
Mm-hmm. And, honestly, this is probably one of the biggest objections that I deal with when it comes to divorce coaching clients. And I say objections. I don't know if that's exactly the word I want, but the biggest thing that I deal with is like literally 100% of women that I talk to about being a divorce coach who are already through their divorce say, I wish I'd known someone like you when I went through my divorce, right? You probably get that too.
All the time.
100% of people. And I always say to them, okay, but if you did, what do you think that you would have had the ability to reason out that you needed this kind of support? And, it's kind of a mixed bag of responses. Some say, yeah, I think I knew I needed something. I just couldn't find it. Or others say, I don't think I would have ever even opened myself up to that. But there's that whole thing where you just try to do everything yourself. So, it just gets pushed to the wayside because it's not, it's tyranny of the urgent, right?
Right.
So, and that kind of leads
to the fire, you're so in the putting out the fire that you don't sit back and think, hold on a second, there might have to be a better way to deal with this, right? And so then you walk down the path of what are the better ways? No. You've got the fire hose, just trying to solve the problem right in front of you. So
it was so funny, kind of funny, but kind of neat too. One of my more recent clients said to me, it's so funny that I found you when I did, because I'd just been talking to my best friend about everything going on with the divorce again. And she just kind of said with such exasperation, there's got to be somebody besides your attorney that can help you with this stuff. And and we kind of laughed because, you can hear in that how frustrating and overwhelming it is for your friends to try to help you through a divorce. Whether they've been through one or not, it's just super exhausting. Even if they really want to, they feel so ill-equipped. And so it was just, it was just fate, I guess, because she talked to her friend, she'd said that, and then she got introduced to me from her attorney the next day. And maybe she related that story to him. And he's like, actually, there is someone.
Right.
So that was pretty cool. But, obviously it's a very emotional time. And I think as women, it's safe to say we have more emotions than men. So it's very common to just feel completely overwhelmed. And that's not to say men aren't also, but just, that there are all these emotional overreactions that are happening and we're basing important decisions on those. And so part of, fear brain is being able to step outside of your emotions and see a situation with a little bit more logic. And of course, that's what you and I try to do all the time with our clients.
Yeah, bring awareness and attention to it.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And, one thing that I noticed during mine was that I was having like memory loss issues that I had never dealt with. I was 44 when I was going through my divorce. It wasn't it wasn't anything else that I'd ever experienced before. And I think it was just, your brain kind of goes into like a survival mode. And in survival mode, there's certain functions I think that just have to go to the wayside because of just, holding on to reserves for the big stuff, right?
Absolutely. And it does. Your memory is absolutely affected by the experience of having to be in survive the threat mode. It encodes it wrong. It misinterprets it, and sometimes doesn't store it well either. And Annie, I want to tell you, I had the same experience. I almost feel, because I'm many years out now, 2010 it ended. We're talking, almost 11 years. Mm-hmm. And there are still parts of that time of my life that I don't really have great memory on, just because I felt like I was in fight or flight. It was unfortunately a very high conflict divorce. Mm-hmm. And I was in fight or flight steadily for 4 years.
Wow. Yeah, that's a long time too.
It is.
Yep. Yeah. And that leads into my next point, which is fatigue. When your brain is trying to do all of these things and just survive, it's extremely exhausting. You probably need more sleep than you normally do, more rest, more restful activities like reading or taking hot baths or whatever other kind of things you enjoy that are quiet and, alone, and you're able to just unplug completely, I guess. What are some ways that you think are good to combat that fatigue?
The funny thing when you said that, I actually went the opposite way. I decided, with all of the stress of fight or flight, that I needed to feel better. And so I would cry on the garage steps. I lived in Florida. We didn't have basements. I was crying on the garage steps, looking at a elliptical trainer with a bunch of junk on it. And I was like, well, I can cry here, or I can cry and start to move slowly on the elliptical trainer. And what I found was that I felt less tired and less beaten down by the whole thing when I exercised, because what I was doing was fighting the adrenaline and cortisol with feel-good hormones.
Yeah, that's a great point.
And causing them, I'm such a science girl, obviously the nurse in me, and I've just been a lifelong lover of science. So I started to combat and recognize that if I pumped the feel-good hormones through me, it lasted and it was building on itself. And so I ended up getting in tremendous shape because I just wanted to be on the other side of threat and fear and on the good side. And so, it would work.
Hey, you know what? It's funny that you said that, because it didn't even come to my mind when I first thought of fatigue. I thought of relaxing, but I did the exact same thing. I actually joined 9 Round, which is a kickboxing circuit. Wow. And I kicked and punched to the best weight I've had as an adult, and it felt really darn good.
Awesome.
I love that point. Yes. And, another thing that I think comes up, and really I'm not 100% sure if this is a fear brain thing, but it feels to me like it probably is. And I've heard it described as ANTS, ANTS, automatic negative thoughts. And I feel like that maybe that's kind of just an underlying waiver that's just constantly going on. That's a part of fear brain, where you're just, no matter what happens, your immediate thought, whether you ever voice it or not, is that thing is going to go badly. It's not going to work out. It's, I'm not enough. I'm a mess. All these negative thoughts that maybe we've been saying to ourselves our whole life, or someone else has been saying to us our whole life. And it's destroying our morale and our confidence. And the reason it's so dangerous is because most of the time, most people don't even realize it's happening because they're not saying the things out loud. So what are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, so I've never really heard it put that way, but I could imagine that a byproduct of all of this, imagine you're in let's say something calm. You're talking to your lawyer, right? It should be kind of a calm thing. Your lawyer's working to help you, but your fear brain's going off because you're telling yourself all these things. And then you can't remember what he's telling you. And then you start basically shaming yourself or, starting to believe negative things because it's all perpetuating. Like, I'm not handling this well. Oh, and by the way, I'm not remembering what he's saying. Oh, and by the way, everything he's saying must be bad because I can't even remember it. And I'm getting all worked up. And I think it's a snowball effect.
Yeah, for
so
sure.
I can see how, and certainly talking to yourself like that is going to decay your morale and your confidence in your ability and in yourself and in your ability to get through this well.
Well, I think I want to say it comes from Dr. Daniel Amen. Okay, he does a ton of brain research. And you know what was so funny? I had a day sometime last year. I don't even remember what the circumstances were, but it was just one of those days. And I was actually sitting at the park and I thought, you know what? I'm going to do a Facebook Live because I feel like, it's really easy as a divorce coach to want to be that person that, appears to have it all together for their clients. And I thought, what better thing to do than to be real with the people that, follow me on social media. So I recorded this live video and I was just sitting there talking about the way this day sucked and how I was processing it. And I had this thought come to mind about ants. And I hadn't even really read about it recently, but it just suddenly came to my mind as I was sitting there talking. And literally, as I was talking about automatic negative thinking, a giant carpenter ant was crawling on my shirt. You could see it in the camera. Okay. And I'm like laughing and I'm saying to whoever's watching this video, oh my gosh, I cannot believe this. Do you see this ant? I'm sitting here talking to you about ants and there's an ant crawling on me. And it's just like the way this day has been. Like, no matter what happens, I cannot get away from these ants crawling all over me. It was really amazing.
Cool. Yeah, that's a great analogy.
Well, so one important thing to note is that this kind of categorically low functioning brain responses can happen to anyone. You could be the CEO of a Fortune 500 company and still not be able to think clearly, make sound decisions about your divorce when your brain gets hijacked. So it's not a measure of intellect or ability or status. It's just a fact. Divorce is a painful death of a dream that I think is kind of like a giant crane ripping a 30-year-old tree from the ground. Those roots go every which way. Everything that was on solid ground before is not now. And this is true even if you wanted or asked for the divorce. Because the truth is most women who file for divorce did everything in their power to not file for divorce. And it's still a loss, right?
It really is. There is so much loss in divorce. I talk about the stages of grief, Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's stages of grief, and, your anger, bargaining, denial, and you move through all those things up and down, in and out. And, there's the loss of your identity. If you saw yourself as part of a couple, you saw yourself as a wife, you might have seen yourself as a stay-at-home mom, and that might be changing. You might lose your sense of financial security. You might lose something that's very upsetting, and that is part or half of the time with your children when they start to share time with their dad. And so, yes, it is a lot of loss. It really is. And it's very, very important to process the pieces of the loss.
And another important thing to think about with fear brain is, it does involve shame and guilt. I think that probably one or both of those is at the root of it in most situations. Susan, would you just talk about both shame and guilt, maybe the difference between the two, how they manifest, what to do about them?
Sure. So, so shame is basically like a painful or intense negative feeling. It could be humiliation, it could be distress, and it can come from a lot of different places. it can come from feeling like you were foolish or wrong. It can be regret, or feeling dishonorable or dishonored. It can come from, just reflecting inward and creating some self-hatred. And it can also be something like when you're going against what the societal norms are. And so if you think about shame and divorce, it may be evoked when thinking about what other people are thinking about us, or feeling guilty, that's bringing in the guilt, the bad feelings about ourselves, what we're telling ourselves for getting divorced, or maybe not doing something consistent with our spiritual beliefs, feeling, shame or guilty, or assigning meaning to the fact that you fell out of love or feel like you're going to hurt your children. You might even be feeling shame that you're brave enough to do something that's uncommon in your immediate circle of family and friends. And, those are very, very powerful. Shame is a very powerful feeling. Guilt is a very powerful feeling. And a lot of times there's so much of it is self-talk, telling yourself that you should feel that way, or, kind of looking outward and assigning meaning and bringing it in hard on yourself.
Yeah, that's true. It is definitely self-inflicted in a lot of cases, and it comes from our belief systems.
Sure.
And a lot of those get really tested when we go through a divorce, because, I know I, for one, was someone who would have told you for most of my life that I didn't believe in divorce. Like, there's no reason for that to ever happen. Right. And the reality is that divorce happens when you don't have two parties who are both willing to put in the work that it takes, because relationships are hard.
Yeah.
And, there are books that are written and people that talk about how one person alone can save or, heal a marriage. I don't know. I mean, I feel like the jury's still out. Yes, they can certainly incite change by, doing things differently. And I think that is a very important part of the attempt to repair the marriage, whether or not it ultimately ends or survives. I think it's very important that we do all that we can do for, as, ourselves. And beyond that, we can't control what the other party does or doesn't do. So I think it's definitely self-inflicted. We have to really start to reassess ourselves and our whole belief systems about relationships and about divorce. And that's a very multifaceted situation, I think.
It is, absolutely. Well said.
Well, so what would you say are some of the triggers that people have that lead them into fear brain? We've talked about some of them,
Right.
But I would love to, if you've got other ideas, hear what your other ideas are, and maybe even give some ideas of how to manage these common divorce triggers for fear brain.
Sure, absolutely. So, I really think if you spread it into two big categories, I think the biggest fear trigger in divorce is around money. What will happen? Will I be able to support myself? Will I have to give money over to her? Will I have to get a job? Is my spouse being transparent about our assets and debts? Mm-hmm. It all swirls around, and there's posturing, when people are in, perhaps a litigated mode of getting divorced, where there's attorneys and things like that. There might be some posturing. The husband says, I'm not going to give you anything, and also I'm going to take the kids and all these things. But the money issues are very, very hot in and big triggers, because uncertainty is a hard pill to swallow, and in the majority of the process of divorce, there is a lot of uncertainty until you get down to the marriage settlement agreement. You could have a lot of fears, and you could be telling yourself some pretty scary stories about what your life's going to look like in the future. And so for that piece, managing it, if I'm lucky enough to get a client when they're just thinking about divorce, I always say knowledge is power. If you've not been the person familiar with the finances or really understanding the finances, it's a good time when you're thinking about divorce to show an interest And, whether that's an overt interest or whether it's kind of looking around and saying, what are our assets? What are our debts? What do I know about retirement accounts and things like that? Because knowledge is power. And the more you know, the more realistic you can be. And I think it does dismantle the fear and thus is less triggering. And then one of the other really big triggers is just everything around kids, the schedule, access to them, covering their expenses, what is co-parenting going to look like? And again, it's during the divorce process as you're crawling towards what the final outcome is. It's a push-pull, Husband wants one thing, wife wants another thing. You're trying to meet in the middle. You're trying to, get to some kind of fair ground, but there's also, again, can be a lot of posturing that causes triggering. And, there can be just communication with kid issues and things like that can be very high conflict and be very triggering. And I tend to recommend to clients that are in that kind of a situation to move into a parenting app such as Our Family Wizard or Two Houses or Fair, FAYR, because it's a good way to communicate where, guess what? You're going to be held accountable. It's all there. And so what starts to happen is people are afraid that what they write or what they're reading is going to be printed. So people are less likely to try to hit the hot buttons of the other person when there could be other eyes that see it. So those are a couple of examples of where I think the highest triggering in divorce is. For me, if you want me to keep going, a little bit of managing them is mindfulness in the moment. First of all, like I said, educating yourself, getting as much information. Google about what the laws in your state are or your county. Google about what are the requirements for me? What am I going to need to know about parenting and assets and debts? Information is power. But in the moment of being triggered in divorce, tuning in and saying, oh, here it is. My heart's beating faster. My palms are sweating. What is this? What am I reacting to? What story am I telling myself? How can I focus on the words being said and not on my emotions right here and now around them? And listening wholeheartedly to what's being said, either by your attorney, because that can be very triggering and stressful, or by your spouse, and preparing to reflect back to them. Because here's a funny thing. Could the other person be in their fear brain too? Two fear brains coming at each other, right?
Right.
But there is so much power in being able to thwart the hijack and staying present and keeping the thinking brain online. And one of the very easy things you can do is to begin to do slow, rhythmic, deep breathing, because it sends a message to the brain, all is well, all is well.
Yeah.
Thwarts that hijack right up.
I heard an attorney saying, it may have been one of the episodes of this show, the process of divorce is very simple. The complication comes in the personalities. So it's interesting to think of it that way, because we often, I think, in the middle of it all, feel like divorce is so complicated. But truly, the process is not. But it is made difficult by the personalities involved in it. And obviously fear brain is a very big part of that. Now, one thing that you said that I would like to have you define just a little bit is the word posturing.
Oh, sure.
What do you mean when you talk about that?
So typically what I was I don't hate to use the word victim, but this happened a lot throughout my divorce. Just the other side says, we're going to do this. Or the other side says, we're going for full custody. And it's just kind of staking a claim, making a position. And you might hear that and think, that's actually a reality. No, for some, it could be a reality. I don't want to, minimize that. But, in a regular old everyday divorce, there, the spouse could say, well, you give the kids McDonald's, so I'm going to take custody away from you. I'm going to go for full custody. And that will really create tons. That's a really credible threat. That's not an imaginary threat. That's someone, creating fear in you. My goodness, I could lose my children.
Yeah, now that makes sense. And I actually, the example that came to my mind when you were talking was about, I interviewed an attorney on the show that was talking about how sometimes what you're describing, a man, for example, will be posturing, that this is how divorce happens. Here's what's going to happen. Like he's talking to the soon to be ex-wife saying, here's what's going to happen. You're going to, whatever, like you're saying, posturing. And this attorney, gets this secondhand information from the woman. And he says, oh, really? Where did he get his law license? I thought that was hilarious, but and it's so true. Like there's so much fear mongering, if you want to call it that, that goes on, and I think it's important to note these things, because if you're trapped in the middle of it and you're hearing us talk about this, you're probably having a light bulb moment right now going, oh, okay, that isn't real. I can cling to something that is real and is okay. And I don't have to let my fear brain take over. And I want to say one thing we have not yet covered is, I think, one of the big contributors to fear brain, and it's extreme independence. I don't know if you would have maybe seen this recent meme that's been circulating on social media. And what it says is simply this: extreme independence is a trauma response.
So like hunkering down and just going within and just trying to muscle through this yourself emotionally, physically, mentally, spiritually.
I don't need anybody. I got this. I mean, did you experience that in your divorce at all?
I was really lucky. I had a lot of support. My brother is a family law attorney, and I have a very supportive family. So they wouldn't even leave me alone if I would try to be alone. But I will be honest, a little bit of that led to me throwing in the towel, because everyone was tired of seeing me, ridiculously underweight and, whittling away to nothing. And, kind of not unlike myself, somewhat of a quivering, person. And so, while that is the opposite of, I think what we're trying to talk about here, I was really grateful for the support that I had. It was life-saving, really life-saving.
Well, and you are blessed. And I did have some support through mine as well, but I know that some of those listening here today have endured more than any woman should have to endure, maybe even since childhood. They've had to do it all. If something was going to get done, it would have to be them doing it. Maybe you had parents you couldn't count on physically or emotionally. Maybe you have had sexual or physical abuse in your past and you learned to stuff and deal. You can handle it. No one else can be trusted with your well-being. You're going to take care of this. And I still remember the moment, something like probably 8 years before my divorce, when a mentor and friend that I'd been sharing my marital distress with responded to something I had just said with what I could see registered on her face as a light bulb realization. Oh, you mean you can't trust him with your well-being, your emotional well-being, can you? And I cried. It's like the first time I think that I felt like somebody got it. And she put it in a way that I had never even thought to explain it.
What a friend. What a great friend.
And, there were many more moments like that as my marriage died a slow and painful death. But what I did not do that I see way too many women do in divorce and life in general is handle it alone. And I didn't have a supportive family, but I had good friends. I had people who were checking in on me and making sure that I was okay. I had those moments when I chose to reach out to trustworthy friends. And I was also in therapy. So I had a therapist that was helping me manage as well. And I had many more moments that slowly but ultimately led to the healing of my mind and the strengthening of my courage to be able to walk away from a lifetime of toxic and abusive relationships. And that honestly would not have happened if I had just handled it. And Susan, I wondered if you would share from your experiences, if not personally, then maybe professionally, about how the refusal to ask for help can really destroy people's lives and their peace, especially during their divorce process.
Yeah. So first of all, thank you for sharing your story. And I am glad that, you had support. So pretty typically, most of my clients are people that find me because they don't have access to friends. They've been busy building, they have good friendships, but not the kind of friendship like you described, where your friend deeply listened and had an assessment of what was going on that created that like aha moment with you, like, eureka, this is it. This is actually what I'm feeling. But so, a lot of my clients have been managing their jobs, taking care of their kids, might have elderly, somewhat frail parents. They've got a group of friends, but everybody's divorce is different. And so they do tend to kind of lock it down. And when they're getting to the point where they're really aware, I just cannot do this alone anymore, because everything is suffering. Their physical health is suffering. Their work performance is suffering. They're snapping at their kids. That's typically when they say, I'm so glad I found you. I really need help with this.
Yeah.
And it is, a divorce coach, as you and I know very well, is that objective support person. It's great to have friends and family. It's great to have a good attorney supporting you, but it's that objective listener that wants you to get where you want to go in your own unique way, that you need to move through this. That's what's really valuable. And, I would encourage people to reach out for whatever kind of help they need, because when my clients come to me, they're in pretty bad shape.
Yeah. Yeah. I always tell my clients, even after they become clients, they still sometimes do this, where they'll like bank up their sessions and be like, I'm not going to use it till I really need it. And I'm like, no, that's not the way that we should do this. Like, don't wait until something is a crisis. Let's stay in touch regularly so we can kind of keep that from happening. Right.
Yes, absolutely. The growth is in the regularity.
Yeah, for sure. Well, thank you for being here, Susan. I know, listeners, that if Fear Brain has been holding you hostage, this has probably resonated with you. And I hope that maybe you're ready to stop handling it and start doing something about it. You do not have to live in fear, no matter what you're facing in your divorce. You do not have to do divorce alone. If you have further questions, you can take your next best step and reach out. You can find answers at the startingoverstronger.com website, or you can email me directly with your questions at annie@startingoverstronger.com. Whatever it is that you need, you can discover the answers probably within, and you can make things happen in your best interest for you and your kids during your divorce. You just need to rediscover the tools that you may have forgotten about, tapping into the strength and wisdom inside of you to step out of fear. Think of fear as an acronym. It naturally tends to mean forget everything you know and run in circles too often from what you know. But with your intentional efforts, it can mean face everything and rise. The choice really is yours, no matter what. Divorce coaches like Susan and myself do what we do because we don't want to see fear destroy lives like it can so very easily do during divorce, especially. If you're curious to learn more about what a divorce coach does, visit the website and book a discovery call. It is my gift to you so that you can upload your situation and download my solution. Thank you again for joining us each week as we explore life during and after divorce and how to make the best of it all. Join us again next week for more help as you divorce and hope as you are starting over stronger.